So, hello everyone. My name is Stefanie Fächner. I work for klicksafe, the German Awareness Center in the Safer Internet Consortium, and we are also co-organizers of this conference. In our work, we deal with many safer internet issues, but I think, as sad as it sounds, our long-term seller is definitely cyberbullying. Oops, sorry. When we tackle the topic in different ways and with different activities, on the one hand with awareness-raising tools, sorry Simon, we'll still do that, but also with different pedagogical and information materials targeting different audiences, primarily parents, teachers, and other professional carers of young people, and also young people directly. Before I move to our new teaching material, I would like to briefly outline our latest awareness-raising activities we did when we launched the new handbook. Together with our Safer Internet.de partners, some of them are here today. Thanks very much for your cooperation. We called out a Stop Bullying Week earlier this year. We reported daily on our social media channels of different aspects of cyberbullying. We did a crowd-speaking activity, a so-called Thunderclap campaign that works similar to crowdfunding, but instead of money, you collect supporters who give their voice, and if you reach a certain number, that will be the message will be appearing on your social media timeline. So this is about what Joachim mentioned earlier. It's about creating positive images. We also won 5 popular YouTube stars who made so-called confession videos of how they bullied or were bullied in schools. That helped us a lot with credibility and reaching out to young people directly. And last but not least, we did photo shoots with young people, so we had material for our publicity. Some of these tools might also be helpful to you. We are using them because it helps us to draw attention to an issue that is highly topical. No? Why isn't it? Let's talk numbers. We know from different studies that about 1/3 of all young people have witnessed forms of bullying in their surroundings. And from people working in classrooms, we know that in most classes, 1 or 2 students are attacked by their classmates. These numbers show that professional treatment of cyberbullying is absolutely necessary, and that the treatment of bullying cases shouldn't be the responsibility of individual teachers, but that cyberbullying prevention and also intervention should be systematically implemented in all schools. And to be honest, in Germany, we don't have that. And not only in secondary schools, but it would be best to start at the end of elementary schools already. We know that most cases of bullying occur between the age of 13 and 15. So we would need 1 or 2 years in advance to start social trainings, etc., to prepare and improve the situation. So this really is a call for action for politicians, for school management, for teachers and social workers to start working on this together. Our lessons learned. klicksafe has been dealing with cyberbullying for a long time. We are experts in providing pedagogical material for prevention, but our experience also shows that prevention simply isn't enough. It's like learning to swim. You cannot really learn if you stay outside of the water. You have to be exposed to the water if you want to swim, and it's the same with bullying. Nice prevention projects are okay, but it might still be happening, so there needs to be a plan. That's why we need intervention to be able to stop it. This is our lessons learned, and as a result, we teamed up with experts in intervention to develop an interdisciplinary and also holistic approach on bullying. Our new handbook combines knowledge from violence prevention, practical experience in social work, and prevention projects from media education, and treats cyberbullying with a systemic approach. I now have the rather difficult task to briefly outline a rather complex, rather scientific material with more than 200 pages in about 10 minutes. Here you can see the table of contents, and I will just pick out some tiny parts of it so you'll get an impression of what this is all about. Of course, this can only be a teaser and I can't really go into it. I'll start off with background information on cyberbullying and specific characteristics of online bullying. Then I'll briefly present the main goals of different intervention methods. Tomorrow, in the parallel session on cyberbullying, you'll get to know a hands-on approach on systemic conflict management. Sarah Bluma will illustrate a case and will show the course of action of the systemic conflict management in schools. So you'll experience that step by step tomorrow. And in your conference bags, I think Julia just mentioned that, you'll find a short extract from the material translated into Polish. This might be helpful to you if you think about implementing similar methods in your schools. What I have to mention is that only people trained in intervention should do them. Otherwise, bullying might not be stopped. To be honest, it might backfire and become even worse. So if you don't have the infrastructure for a systemic approach, you might, of course, still do prevention work or practical projects and bring a systemic approach on the way. From cyberbullying to cyberbullying, maybe you've realized that we write the cyber in cyberbullying in brackets. We didn't used to do that, but we started this year as it is the logical consequence of media habits of young people. There is no online, offline life that is separated. It's all intertwined. It's their life, and of course, it's online. So bullying in most cases takes place online and offline at the same time. Yet, there are still some characteristics that are typical for cyberbullying, and I mean the online part of it, and we have to bear them in mind when we want to understand the mechanisms and the effects. One is the loss of private sphere. When you don't differentiate between online and offline any longer, there simply is no safe place. It's there 24/7. Ken mentioned it earlier, it has become more complex. So this is not new, but it has become more complex. And in each case, that can make it very dramatic. It's also much more difficult to stay in control of your data online. It's too easy to say, think before you post. The sharing and spreading of information is very difficult to be in control of it, because all of those services, they rely on us on sharing personal information, and we all do it, so it can get out of hand very easily. On the other hand, the perpetrators can disguise themselves. They can pretend to act anonymously. In most cases, the victim has some sort of idea who might be behind it, but usually it takes a long time until they definitely figure out who it is. And for bullies, on the other side, it's quite easy to stay emotionally detached from their actions. They don't see how they hurt their victims. So they are often not fully aware of how much damage they actually cause in other people. I've mentioned the expression systemic approach quite a few times. It's time to go into it. This is a very basic but also very important assumption. Cyberbullying is a complex conflict pattern with many different players. What does it mean? It means that it's not simply about victims and perpetrators, but in most cases a group of people is involved. And in order to resolve their conflicts, we have to consider the whole group, their relations, their values, their means of communication. Only in doing so we can achieve sustainable solutions. It's not just bully and victim. There are other people. Some might help the bully, some might help the victims, and most of them would really like to stay out of this. But they are a group. And the goal is to strengthen bystanders so that they might step up and become supporters. This, of course, is particularly relevant in forced situations, at school, at work, whenever you can't choose the group of people you have to be with. Another crucial assumption is the following quote: "Only when children and young people are emotionally attached about the effects of this social behavior, they can develop compassion out of empathy." So the goal is to find a way to encourage emotional compassion. It has to be their intrinsic motivation to act in a pro-social way. Cognitive empathy isn't enough. Cognitive empathy focuses on understanding, but we know from violent youth that they don't have a lack of cognitive empathy. If we are teaching them cognitive empathy, we might even help them to better understand how bullying works so they can bully even better. The key to success is to reach them emotionally, and that's a tough challenge. Main goals of an intervention. There are different methods of intervention and different forms of intervention, but they all share the same goal. It's most important to de-escalate the conflict situation and to stop bullying for good. Therefore, an intervention needs to be planned. The preparation is done by a team of experts that analyzes the case beforehand. The methods should be transparent before, so the victim needs to know what will happen to give out a mandate for the intervention. Then the intervention takes place and follows certain steps. It is very important to include all children in the intervention. It is also important to have the support of the headmaster and to have a long-term plan to ensure that bullying doesn't start again once the intervention is over. Whereas the no-blame approach, as the name says, avoids assignments of guilt and punishment of the perpetrator, other methods, such as the FARSA method, work with confrontations. So there are different ways of doing it. There are also different forms of intervention. The short bullying intervention takes only about 2 hours, so this is really fast and for emergency situations, whereas the systemic bullying intervention usually takes 2 to 3 days and is usually combined with a 2-day social training to strengthen the group and give them tools for nonviolent behavior. So what is the difference between these two forms of interventions? In the short version, the victim and the perpetrator usually stay anonymous. So the course leader usually works with stories. I'm now going to tell you a story. He uses metaphors to achieve empathy and compassion. In the systemic bullying intervention, the victim usually is present and his or her case is unveiled. So the course leader here works with techniques of switching perspectives to create compassion. There are pros and cons to both forms, but we usually recommend the longer version, if you can do it. In all cases, a differentiation between behavior and person is absolutely crucial. So when you talk, for instance, to a perpetrator, you have to face them what they did. It was not okay, but we did, but we still respect you as a person. All interventions encourage pro-social behavior. That means a behavior that satisfies own personal needs while respecting the needs of others. In classes with bullying cases, we experience a lot of dissocial behavior that deliberately aims at harming other people. It can be their body, it can be their soul, it can be their property. During the intervention, there needs to be a consensus of joint norms and values. So positive norms, positive values have to be re-established, and that usually is fixed in some sort of way with a declaration or of self-commitment or something similar. And we also encourage class teachers to initiate a peer system of help to guarantee the sustainability of the intervention. So this was very brief about interventions. Systemic conflict management also very briefly. What does systemic conflict management mean? It means it is an institutionalized program that systematically treats problems and conflicts in schools and similar institutions. The cases are evaluated, there are measures and goals, and it follows certain principles. Human and children's rights are the foundation. All communication needs to be nonviolent. Every person has the right to be heard. There needs to be evidence that something happened. Without proof, that's it. Help is more important than punishment, and there is a clear distinction between behavior and person. I've already mentioned it. There are different processes. One is implementation. It can be implemented in a classroom. It can be implemented with a selected staff members. It can be the whole school or even a region. So this can be done step by step. Of course, the staff needs to be qualified. There are certain roles, expectations, and tasks. And there are fixed components within a process management. You can see them here on the slide. The strategy for action builds the legal and ethical base. The guidelines are more concrete. The diagnostic results in action. There is always teamwork, and documentary provides information. So, last but not least, I'll show you an emergency checklist. This is also part of the translated materials in your conference bag, And you can use it for bullying cases even without a systemic conflict management in use, because we want you to have something practical at hand when a person at need turns to you. So you have that more in detail. So I'll just briefly point out some of the elements. Number one, offer good relationship and a safe place. So if someone turns to you, ask about the facts and the feelings of the person in need. Don't make them regret their decision to ask for help. Explain what you plan to do. Check self-endangerment. Ask if the person or another person is in danger and discuss possible ways to de-escalate the situation. Define your role and position. You don't have to do everything on your own. Ask a person about their wishes. Be careful with solutions. Agree on future communication, also involving other people. Check if peer counselors can be involved. And in some cases, what do you do if the victim refuses to get help? Try to stay in touch, of course. Offer help. Also, other places where a person can find help. You also don't have to do everything on yourself. Documentation is key. It allows you to gather different perspectives. It also gives you evidence. In our material, we have guidelines and interview sheets. We have also translated them for you, so you can use them or adapt them for your needs. Check who should be involved. Parents, teachers, school management, or even the police. And finally, team up with others who might also help and support you. So, I know this was brief. I hope it was still helpful. Please check out our translated materials, and we hope to see you tomorrow in the cyberbullying session for part 2, which will be the step-by-step approach. Thank you very much for your attention.